Hello human beings, PowerGamer here. People have always been drawn to things that horribly confuse them, and what's the best way to do that? Well, why not solve a mystery and do a jigsaw puzzle at the same time? And if you want to do that, I have just the game for you. The only downside is you're gonna need a really tall hat.
Professor Layton, fixing the world one brain teaser at a time. One of the most beloved and forgotten series of puzzle games ever made. It has a very passionate fanbase, but outside of those dedicated fans, nobody talks about it very much, which is a shame because it certainly seems interesting. I only saw a few things about this series when I was younger, but it always stuck with me, mainly for the art style. It was originally created by Level 5 Inc., a Japanese development studio who at the time was probably best known for developing Dragon Quest VIII, however they would later develop stuff like Ni no Kuni and the Yokai Watch games. It was directed by Tetsuya Shinkai, with the CEO of Level 5, Akihiro Hino, serving as a producer, and interestingly, Akira Tago, a psychologist and professor of Chiba University, supervised direction on the game's development. The game's creation would come from Hino's childhood love of head gymnastics, a series of puzzle books created by Tago that began publishing in 1966. The character of Professor Layton was envisioned by Hino as a mixture of famous detective Sherlock Holmes and archaeologist-explorer Indiana Jones. These elements also inspired them to put the game in an English village set in the 1930s. Layton was also partially inspired by Phoenix Wright from Ace Attorney, who the series would end up doing a crossover with many years later, which is fun. The game also set itself apart in that it featured fully animated cutscenes, which were done by the Studio PA Works, and full of voice acting, which wasn't very common for DS games. The soundtrack was composed by Tomohito Nishiro, with a heavy influence on Le French style of music. Oh, ho, ho. Professor Layton and the Curious Village was released for the DS on February 15th, 2007 in Japan, and the rest of the world about a year later. It sold over 4.49 million copies, which was pretty impressive for a brand new series, and reception was quite positive, as many people found it had a unique blend of puzzle and adventure gameplay. And this was just the beginning, as it would get 2 trilogies of games released on the DS and 3DS, a couple spin-offs on various platforms, a previously mentioned Ace Attorney crossover, and a new game set to release later this year for the Switch. Plus, Curious Village was later ported to mobile devices. Neat.
This is one of those series I've been familiar with for a while, and while I don't have a huge amount of knowledge about it, I think I'm in for a good time. So let's see what kind of lessons I can learn from this professor.
The game lets you name your save file and presents itself as if you're receiving a letter telling you about the information of what happens, which would be a fun idea if this wasn't the only time in the game that this is even slightly alluded to. We follow Professor Herschel Layton, an archaeologist who's driving to a small village called St. Mystere with his apprentice, Luke. The recently deceased Baron Reinhold stated in his will that whoever found his golden apple would receive his entire fortune, but no one has been able to find it. So his widow, Lady Dahlia, sent Layton a letter asking him to investigate the situation. While Layton doesn't consider himself a detective, he accepted as he believed it was the gentlemanly thing to do. After solving a quick puzzle and simply finding the village's location, the two arrive and get help from this guy named Franco to cross the drawbridge and enter St. Mystere. And that's really about it. The rest of the game is Layton and Luke searching the village to find the golden apple. There's a handful of twists that come into play, but we'll get more into those later. The story isn't super groundbreaking, but it's still pretty good. There is a real sense of mystery, and you do want to find out what's going on in this weird place. The writing is really solid, and you come across a wide variety of colorful characters along the way, and while most of them barely mean much in the grand scheme of things, a lot of them are pretty charming. The game's presentation is quite solid. The majority of it is structured like a visual novel with moving character portraits, and while it can look a little crunchy due to the hardware, the artwork is still really good. The backgrounds are extremely detailed, and like I said earlier, there's fully animated cutscenes that pop up complete with voice acting, which really adds to the overall experience. And the soundtrack perfectly encapsulates the feeling of an old-timey English village that the game is going for. The game is pretty unique in that it's a hybrid of a point-and-click game and a puzzle game, and yes, I know point-and-click games mainly revolve around puzzles, but this one works differently. Instead of picking things up and using them to interact with the environment, you're just given random puzzles that you need to solve in order to progress. The people of St. Mystere are obsessed with puzzles, and Professor Layton loves to solve them, so almost everyone you talk to will give you a puzzle to solve because they all just have these on standby. Hell, sometimes Layton will randomly give Luke a puzzle to solve as a form of teaching him. The logistics of the system is honestly kind of weird when you think about it. Layton is trying to solve this big mystery, and some of it is pretty time sensitive, yet he always takes the time to do some math problems or find a hidden picture. Sometimes the puzzles relate to what the characters are actually doing, but those are pretty few and far between. I get this is how the game works, but it's still funny to think about. Use the touchscreen to talk to people or point things out, which can lead to finding puzzles, or tap the shoe, which allows you to move to other areas. If something doesn't give you a puzzle, it can either give you a hint coin, or Layton and Luke will make some sort of comment about it. But the overworld stuff is only a footnote of this game. The main bulk of it is solving puzzles, which are brain teasers you'd often find in a newspaper or a school.
Believe me, it's way more fun than it sounds.
There's a huge variety of puzzles in this game, and they vary a lot in difficulty. You've got to organize stuff in specific ways, answer questions correctly, do weirdly complicated math problems, find hidden objects, move things into the right place, and so much more. And all of this is thanks to our old pal, the touchscreen. Seriously, the only thing the buttons actually do in this game is progress dialogue, which you can also do by tapping the screen. his stylist is working overtime, so let's hope this job comes with benefits. Stylist dental care is very expensive. There's a ton of puzzles, and the vast majority of them are not mandatory to beat the game. There are some moments where the game requires you to have a set number of puzzles completed in order to progress, but you only really need to do about half of them in order to just finish the story. These things really do make you think in order to solve them, which is both the best and worst part of the game. When you solve one fairly quickly, it can be one of the most satisfying things in the world, and when you get extremely stumped on one, it can make you want to slam your face through the wall. You can get 3 hints per puzzle, but seeing them requires the use of these hint coins that you have a limited amount of, and sadly some hints are much more helpful than others. Some of them can give you some very helpful tips, some of them just give you a slight idea, but it can still be a little confusing, and some of them are just not helpful at all. Seriously, a lot of these hints are almost completely useless, and of course they happen on the most confusing puzzles in the game. Granted, you can solve them almost immediately by just looking up the answer online, but the vast majority of people will say that's cheating and that they're too good for that. I'm not one of those people.
In my defense, some of these are bullcrap.
I wasn't joking when I said some of these puzzles can be infuriating. Now, I am a very stupid person, so some of these are on me, but there are a handful that I think are really poorly explained or just freaking cheap. Like this one asks you how many candles you will have left after a certain amount are extinguished, and the answer is how many candles were extinguished because the others were used up. That is deliberately trying to mess with you, which I know is the point, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Or this one, which gives you a list of objects and the right answer is none of them. Or this one that tells you to cut pieces so they form a rectangle without being flipped, which I thought meant they couldn't be turned at all. Turns out they can. Or this one, where at least one person is lying, but anyone else can be too, which means your best option is blind guessing. Other times you need to look over the most minute of details in order to figure some of these out. Some of them literally make no sense at all, like seriously, how was I supposed to figure out that these bite marks were directions? A lot of them require you to move matches, and your move limit is how many matches you can move, not how many moves you can make, which isn't very clear. And there are some where you literally give the same wrong answer twice because you're an idiot. No, I'm not projecting. What makes you say that? But the worst ones for me were puzzle 41, where you have to figure out which coins will end up on the top side of the rope, and I, for the life of me, could not wrap my head around this. And puzzle 46, where you need to trace a star, and I did not realize how you were supposed to draw it. No, the hints did not help. I also heavily criticize the puzzles where you have to write an answer because the game isn't always the best at registering what you write. I get what they're trying to go for, but moments like this really make me wish they gave you the option of using a keypad instead.
I will fully admit that some of the more troubling parts of this game can be chalked up to me being an idiot, but I think my point still stands. They're just not explained very well, which, yes, sometimes is intentional because it's trying to trick you, but even still, I think a lot of these just are not well designed.
Thankfully, these moments are relatively few and far between. The majority of the puzzles are pretty fun. Doing things like figuring out which picture is in a one-line puzzle or trying to get a weird math problem correct can be very cathartic when you get them right, especially on the first try. Things like dividing amounts of liquid into containers or sliding a ball into a hole are brain-teasing without being too tricky, as long as you realize you don't have to do these things in the minimum amount of turns. And honestly, one of the most hilarious things that can happen in this game is when you get the right answer through the wrong methods. Hey, I'm not gonna complain. Sometimes you can even write all over the screen if you want to jot down notes. And I like the little explanation it gives after you solve them in case you didn't actually figure it out and just guessed or looked it up. This one gives you a fun fact about this type of puzzle, and this one asks if you've been outside today. Did this game just tell me to go touch grass? The game is divided into 9 chapters, with different areas of the village opening up as you go. Some puzzles are found at any point in the game, but others are only available during specific chapters. Thankfully, if you miss any of those, you can go to this old lady's shack to solve them, which is only needed if you want to go for everything. Each puzzle is numbered, although they don't go in order, which is just confusing. Each puzzle is worth anywhere from 10 to 70 picarats, which add to your overall score, and typically the harder the puzzle, the more picarats it's worth, but that's not always the case. If you guess incorrectly, the value goes down, but that only happens twice. Anything after that stays the same, so if you don't care about this, then there's no harm in just making random guesses until you get it right, especially if it's a multiple choice question. And there's really no harm in doing this, since the amount of picarats you get doesn't mean anything, since your progression is tied to how many puzzles you solve, not how many guesses it takes to solve them. Hell, some don't even lose value if you guess wrong, you just need to reset it. Aside from picarats, some of the puzzles can give you one of 3 things: a gizmo, a painting scrap, or a piece of furniture. In the pause menu, you can do things like read Layton's journal, look over your mysteries to refresh yourself on what's going on, or use these 3 collectibles. The gizmos are used to build this robotic dog who can later give you hints on what objects are interactable. The painting scraps are used to fill in this painting like a jigsaw puzzle, and the furniture is used to fill out Layton and Luke's rooms at the inn they're staying at. And this is the only one I didn't complete, since just going through the game normally doesn't give you enough furniture to fill up their happiness meters, and after a certain point, the meters just stop. At first, it depended on what was in their rooms, since they each like different stuff more, but about halfway through, it just froze, and I have no idea why. If you actually do finish each of those, you unlock some bonus puzzles that can be accessed on the main menu. There are also apparently extra puzzles that can be downloaded from the internet every week, but that's been shut down, so they're inaccessible now.
There's well over 100 puzzles in this game, so I am not going to describe all of them because, well, 1, that would spoil the fun, but 2, that would be insanely boring. So instead, let's just go through the story.
Upon entering the town, you can speak with this man named Statchin, who helps you find a hint coin, and an old woman named Ingrid, who gives you a puzzle. Then we finally start Chapter 1, Reinhold Manor awaits. There's also this aspiring writer named Percy, who tells us the entire village land is owned by the Reinhold family, as well as the buildings. Wow, people were right, the 1% do own way too much. This guy named Marco is blocking the path until we solve a puzzle to move him. Outside the manor, they meet Ramon, a servant of the Reinhold family, who gives us another puzzle before letting them enter, and that's the end of the chapter. Yeah, don't get used to them being this short. Inside, we meet the manor's butler, Matthew, who gives us another puzzle. We go upstairs and meet Lady Dahlia, but her cat cat is frightened by a strange loud noise from outside and runs off, so Layton offers to go find her, beginning Chapter 2, The Fugitive Feline. We also meet the Baron's nephew, Simon, and his father, Gordon. Layton and Luke head downstairs where they see a portrait of the Baron as well as his daughter, Flora, and Matthew gives us the frame that allows us to fix the puzzle painting. Outside, they find Claudia, but she runs off again, and we get a glimpse of this strange figure who's apparently after the treasure. Layton and Luke continue to chase Claudia, but she runs off again, so Layton suggests they make a stop at the inn where they meet Beatrice and unlock the inn room. Outside, they discover the crank for the drawbridge has gone missing, meaning no one can enter or exit the village. We also come across some other characters, like this paranoid guy named Deke, a guy in the town hall named Rodney, a fortune teller named Agnes who gives us fish bones, this really angry guy named Polly, and this giggling teen girl named Andrea. We corner Claudia and use the fish bones to calm her down. The two head back to the manor, only to discover that Simon has been murdered and an inspector named Chelmy was sent to investigate. Layton asks Matthew if he saw anything, but all he was able to find was this weird small cog. Chelmy asks if everyone is present, but Ramon seems to have vanished. Layton speaks with Lady Dahlia in her room and says that he believes Simon's murder is linked to the Golden Apple. She asks him to find Ramon, beginning Chapter 3, The Missing Servant. Layton also sees a picture of what appears to be Lady Dahlia holding a baby, presumed to be Flora. However, when he asks her about it, she claims that she never had any children, which just sounds weird. So they ask Matthew, and he explains that the picture is of the Baron's former wife, but he has no idea why the two look identical or how the Baron and Dahlia met in the first place. He just showed up with her one day. Outside, Layton finds Simon's glasses, which he brings to Chelmy, who just dismisses them. In the village, Percy tells us about the large tower all the way in the back that nobody goes to, but frequently makes strange noises, and Deke lets you pass through the small clock tower if you solved at least 12 puzzles, which open up in the north of town.
Because a clock tower is way more efficient than, I don't know, a door.
We meet this girl named Lucy who tells us Ramon is friends with a guy named Jarvis, and there's an alley cat that doesn't amount to anything. Further north is a detective named Zappone, a clumsy guy named Gerard, and finally Jarvis, who says people have been vanishing lately for no apparent reason other than that the people who go missing were supposedly feeling tired or sick right before they disappeared. He suggests we ask Zappone, so go back to him, and he says to ask Crouton, the owner of the town restaurant. In the restaurant, meet this nerdy kid named Flick and Crouton, who says that he's heard people mention a man kidnapping people, but they should go to the cafe for more answers. You know, if Lucy had just suggested that, we would have saved a lot of time. This leads right into Chapter 4, Night Falls, where Layton and Luke step outside, and Gerard asks them to go find his watch that he dropped in the park. Go there and find Deke, who says Beatrice found it, so head over to the inn and then bring it back. That really did, in fact, quite literally, sure serve a purpose. Go to the cafe, and if you've solved 30 puzzles, this guy named Crumb will tell you that a gluttonous kid named Prosciutto has seen a strange man wandering up and down the streets at night. Find Prosciutto, who says that it was an old man carrying a large sack, but that's all he got. And would you look at that, outside is an old man hauling Ramon's unconscious body in a sack. He runs off, and Layton and Luke give chase, but he manages to get away, and they hear those strange noises coming from the tower. They head back to the street to look for clues and find another cog, just like the one from the manor. They head all the way back to the manor to inform everyone of what they saw and ask to start a search, but Chelmy says this will cause an uproar. Then out of nowhere, Ramon shows up with absolutely no memory of what happened. Layton and Luke question this, but decide to retire for the night. The next morning, they got a call from Chelmy asking them to return to the manor. I then proceeded to spend the next hour just wandering around the village solving every puzzle I could find, which probably wasn't necessary, but whatever. On the way to the manor, we find this note that talks about the Baron's first wife, Lady Violet, dying from a case of the flu. At the manor, we see Chelmy freaking out about Matthew trying to serve him sweets, and then he berates Layton for supposedly interfering with his investigation. Dude, calm down, I got here first. We go outside and talk to Ramon, who still has no recollection of what happened last night, so Layton suggests finding one of the Baron's old friends for info in the Golden Apple.
Oh right, that is why we're here in the first place. I almost forgot about that.
Chapter 5, The Hunt Begins. We ask Matthew if the Baron had any friends, but he says he didn't, aside from maybe Ingrid, who used to be Flora's nurse. We go find her, and she tells us about the Baron and his wife and how he showered Flora with attention after her mom passed away, but she has no idea where Flora is now. She also mentions Lady Violet's grave being in the manor garden, so we go check it out. There's just a statue and some flowers in here, but Matthew suggests finding the Baron's journal, so back inside we go. The journal says something about an item reminding the Baron of Violet, but Flora being unsettled by it. It also tells us the Baron hid the location of the Golden Apple in a note he gave to an old friend. We find Ingrid in the garden, and Layton asks if the Baron had any friends, but all she can recall is him seeing Zappone a couple of times. But something's better than nothing, so we go find him, and he ends up not being helpful. We find another note that reads of making models for every situation, and head to the market where the butcher named Giuseppe hands Layton the vase, thinking it was his, but it's not, so Layton gives it right back. I'm sure that was important. We also find a newspaper with an article about Chelmy and how he loves his wife's sweet potato fritters, which contradicts what happened earlier in the mansion. Strange. Then this guy named Archibald shows up, and it turns out he's the Baron's friend we've been looking for. He says the Baron gave him his old desk, which is at his house, so we head there and find this note in a drawer, but it just has a small X on it. Archibald then gets a call from Beatrice asking for help back at the inn, so they go there, and she says a guest with a pointy mustache covered in smoke trashed the place and left without paying. The types of people you deal with in customer service. Luke laments about their struggle to find the Golden Apple, so Layton suggests they search the one place they haven't been to yet. Chapter 6, The Elusive Tower. Head north through the market and find another note that says something about cheering up the Baron with a tribute to Lady Violet and the villagers. We find this weird lady named Martha along the way, and reach the tower only to find a wall wall blocking the path. They then see the strange girl and ask if she can help, but she gets startled and runs away, leaving behind a ticket for the park's Ferris wheel. Layton and Luke decide to check it out with that shadowy figure following them. Chapter 7, the abandoned park. They go to the park and find it's locked shut, so they go to the town hall and ask for help. Rodney says the park's caretaker could help, and he might be in the sewers since he also manages that. Go into the sewers and find this tourist named Pavel who got really lost, and Sylvain, the caretaker who agrees to open up the park after we solve a puzzle. Go inside the park, which just looks sad, and find another note. This one says that Flora is catching on to the village's secret as she gets older, and the entire park was built for her. The Ferris wheel is in the back of the park, but it doesn't end up being helpful. The only other noteworthy thing is the small shed, but it's locked. The two try to leave, but the Ferris wheel comes loose and rolls around the park, nearly killing them and destroying a bunch of stuff, including the shed. This lets us enter an underground tunnel and solve some mandatory puzzles to find the hidden room and the strange key with a tower on it. Obviously, the two are connected, so they decide to return to the tower, but Layton wants to stop by the inn first.
Dude, we are finally getting answers. This is not the time for an app!
Layton believes someone is after them, and going to the inn will help them find out who it is, leading to Chapter 8, The Shadowy Intruder. At the inn, Layton asks to see the previous day's newspapers, but Beatrice can't find them. Ramon then shows up and says the inspector wants them back at the mansion. We do so, and Chelmy accuses Layton of being the murderer since he claims Simon was killed with that vase Giuseppe handed him earlier. He then throws it against the wall, shattering it, meaning he threw away his proof. Layton says he and Luke were in town when the murder happened, but Chelmy doesn't believe him and demands he hand over the key. Layton brushes him off and says if anyone here is guilty, it's Chelmy. We then have to pick 2 correct dialogue options, which I kinda wish we saw more of since this is the only time this happens in the game. Layton reveals the newspaper he found detailing Chelmy's love for his wife's sweet potato fritters, and Chelmy gets her name wrong. The village was sealed off when looking for Claudia, meaning he couldn't have been able to enter after Simon's death, and that Chelmy couldn't have known about the key unless he was spying on them. All of this can only mean one thing. This man isn't the real Inspector Chelmy, and he's been impersonating him to try and steal the golden apple. Sure enough, the man reveals himself to be that shadowy guy named Don Paolo, and he jumps out the window. Apparently he was an evil scientist who was banished from studying his field due to being evil. He's clearly headed for the tower, so Layton and Luke make their way there and use the key to open up the wall. Finally, Chapter 9, The Tower Secret. Layton and Luke enter the tower, as long as you've completed 75 puzzles, and fall through the floor into the basement. Here we find a strange lab that's apparently keeping tabs on all the villagers. You can also read this journal that the notes we found came from, which talks about the village completing its task. We head upstairs and find this guy named Bruno, and this is where all of the game's mysteries are finally solved. Bruno says it's his duty to guide people to the golden apple, which lies at the top of the tower, and he's responsible for managing life in the village. It turns out all those cogs came from the villagers, who are actually robots built by Bruno, and the entire village was built by him and the Baron as a way of protecting the golden apple. We then have to climb up the tower and solve 7 final puzzles, with Layton explaining to Luke and us what's happening along the way. The crank was taken by Bruno to see if Layton and Luke could be trusted. Don Paolo was the one who skipped out on paying the inn. The people/robots went missing because they broke down, and Bruno brought them to the tower to fix them, which also explains those weird sounds that come from it. Paolo realized Simon was a robot and made up the murder story to disguise himself, and Lady Dahlia is a robot made to resemble Lady Violet, and she's what those journal entries were talking about. For the puzzles, we have an extra tricky ball-moving puzzle, playing a game of Sudoku, which I am really bad at, a math puzzle involving stairs, trying to get this red block out, which is so ultra-specific even a video tutorial I had to use was confusing, organizing cards, figuring out which numbers go where to get a line of 3s, and finally drawing 7 squares on this pin board. At the top of the tower, we find this large room, which is home to that girl from earlier, the Golden Apple herself, Flora. Apparently, the Baron wasn't looking for a successor to his fortune, he was looking for someone who would care for his daughter, and she's been waiting here since he passed. Then Don Paolo attacks with this crazy flying machine and tries to destroy the tower. The 3 of them try to leave, but the stairs crumble, forcing Luke to run ahead on his own. Layton fashions a glider, allowing him and Flora to escape. Don Paolo attacks them, which causes both of their mechanisms to go down. The tower is destroyed, and Layton and Flora end up safely landing, with Layton noticing this apple shape on Flora's neck. Layton reveals that loud noise at the beginning was Don Paolo crashing into the village, which is how he got here in the first place, and that he knows where the fortune is hidden. They head back to Reinhold Manor, and you tap the spot where the apple was on Flora's portrait. This opens a secret room containing the Baron's fortune. Apparently, he didn't just want his successor to be wise, he wanted them to be able to make Flora smile after the death of her mother, which is why that apple appeared. We then hear a recording of the Baron revealing that he died years ago, but had the village built so Flora would be safe until she was old enough to see the world on her own. But now that she is, if the treasure is removed, then all the people of Saint Mystere will shut down. Layton gives the decision of what to do to Flora, who decides she wants to leave the treasure and Saint Mystere as they are. Layton, Luke, and Flora then leave the village, with everyone wishing them a fond farewell. Luke asks if they'll be appearing in the newspaper about this, but Layton says no, as he doesn't want to make a spectacle out of Flora, and the game ends. But after the credits, we see Layton and Luke boarding a train, which seems to be a teaser for the next game.
Professor Layton and the Curious Village is a really charming game. Aside from a handful of puzzles that seem kinda ridiculous, it is very enjoyable, and even if the gameplay doesn't fully grab you, the story and characters probably will. I can easily recommend this game, and I would love to check out the rest of the series. In fact, Layton's puzzle-solving skills have given me the inspiration I need to finally solve some of those mysteries that I've been wondering about for so long. Like, what is the point of life? What are hot dogs made of? Where do men go when they say they're going to get milk? What is this black thing that's been sitting on my desk for 2 years? Seriously, I have no idea what this thing actually is. It just kind of showed up one day. I mean, it looks like it might be a game, but it's completely black. I can't exactly see it. Yeah, well, I guess I'll just open it up and take a look at what the... Fabio.
Did you miss me?
No.
Good.
How are you here? I thought I sealed you away in that void.
Well, before the portal sucked me up, I put a curse on the game and transported it here so that when it opened, I would be freed. Problem is, you're so dumb it took you 7 years to even notice it.
It's only been 2 years.
You told the last time in the void, okay?
Whatever, I'm done with your crap. I'm gonna do something I should have done a long time ago. What the? Why can't I move?
Suspension beam. I have more power than you would think, and now I think it's finally time I get you out of my way for good, with the help of this.
Wait, what game is that?
I'm surprised you haven't figured it out, but I'll give you a hint. It goes in here.
What are you doing to my PS3?
Use it to open the door to the one place worse than the void, and without your precious mega tool, you'll never be able to escape. Have fun!
Fabio, no, no, what are you doing? Fabio, no, don't you dare! Fabio!
Good. Now that he's finally in there, my plan can truly begin.
Hey, Aidan, you owe me $50 for the pizza. Aidan, I am very serious about my money. All right, you asked for it. Wow, it really is bigger on the inside. Aidan, you in here? What the? Why is this here?
Hey Lawrence, what's up?
Hey Zev, have you seen Aidan lately? He owes me $50 for a pizza.
Have you checked his box?
I tried, but I didn't see him in here. He left his PS3 here though, and along with a game. Never heard of it before, and it doesn't have a disc inside. I don't know, do you think that means something?
I'm sure it's fine. What game is it? What?
Yeah, I really have no idea what this means. I've never heard of this before, so I think I'm just gonna...
Get as many people as you can on the phone right now. We could be in serious danger.